Hello YouTube. In this video I'm going to attempt to prove to you that strength standards are useless. For the people who don't know what we're going to be talking about today, strength standards are numbers that one is to hit to achieve a certain goal. Today I will argue that they serve no such purpose, that they offer no guidance or pertinent information, just a vague direction to follow, and that they are both the destination and the way, which means that they often lead nowhere. Now, this is not going to be a contrarian take. The title sounds clickbaity, but I'm 100% serious, and I mean it when I say that they are entirely useless. So, in an effort to not just make a reactionary video, I actually crafted an entire thesis that I'm going to make available for you in the pinned comment if you want to peruse it as you watch this video. It's something fairly serious. And because my arguments are going to be mostly based around observations and examples I'm going to be able to share with you guys, it is greatly structured because strength standards are an institution in the world of YouTube fitness. So when you attack a giant and a god, you have to offer serious arguments, and I came to you prepared. So sit down comfortably, grab a drink, and open up your ears because we're gonna get started. My thesis is as such. Everything strength standards set out to do, to build a base, to motivate people, to guide them, to give timelines, they entirely fail at. And the arguments I'm going to present to you today are as follows. Strength standards are arbitrary. There is no such thing as an objective strength standards, and their very creation makes them unusable. The role they serve is unclear and vacillates between two pursuits, leading to subpar results. They constitute an absolute metric that applies indiscriminately to a wide range of individuals, and they create deadlines that serve no real purpose. They complicate more than they simplify. So this is the basis of this entire video. Every single argument I present, I'm going to demonstrate and I'm going to argue towards. I'm going to give you examples. This was just the introduction because the subject is going to be complex. But at the end of the day, it is something that needs to be tackled because I've never heard anyone actually criticize strength standards, even though in my opinion, they are atrocious. Now, understand, this thesis is not something I crafted in 2 hours. It's the result of 2 years of work and of thinking because just like you, I've been in YouTube fitness, I've been in the dogmatic environment that this platform can be at times, and I've always been of the idea and opinion that strength standards were just part of the environment and the panorama. I never re-questioned them. But the more I made videos, the more I thought about training and its principles and variables, the more I realized that they were not only, for the most part, useless, they were also extremely detrimental. So let me prove that to you today. And let us start with my first point. Most standards, and strength standards are no exception, are either arbitrarily created by YouTubers based off of their own experience or the result of mass anecdotal evidence. Let's observe the first take. What do I mean by they are the result of arbitrary creations? Well, it's simple. Who propagates strength standards? Is it something created by a machine or a computer? No, for the most part, it's created by humans. The humans that you're subscribed to and that you watch. By definition, this means that these standards cannot be objective. They are created by subjective individuals. This in itself is not bad, but it also leads to a problem that becomes immediately evident. There is not a singular strength standard. There is a plethora of them. Strength standards are like assholes. Everybody has one. So if you go to a certain page, they're going to have a certain standard, and you go to a different page, they're going to have a different standard. For one guy, a standard bench is going to be 225. For another guy, it's going to be 315. Who is in the right, who is in the wrong? It's absolutely impossible to say. That already creates a problem because there is a dissonance in the information that you receive. Who should you trust? who is correct. I'm arguing in this video that no one is, because the very notion these people espouse is incorrect in its essence. And then there is the second origin of strength standards, which is anecdotal evidence amassed by websites or again by individuals that then are going to try and amalgamate these numbers to create an average. And that looks more scientific because it is not based entirely off of subjectivity, it's based off of a collection of anecdotes. But that leaves another problem. Usually, the type of websites or the type of people that are going to collect such information and data commit one fatal mistake. They fail to discriminate, meaning that they take the information from every single person they can. They do not filter. And this, if you know what YouTube Fitness is made of for the most part, becomes a massive problem because the vast majority of people on this platform are novices. And so the numbers and the strength standards that result from these polls are for the most part skewed. So that is my first issue. The standards in themselves, the numbers that you look at, are incorrect because when YouTubers make them up, they let their own sensibilities skew these standards. Because, for example, someone who's immensely strong at deadlift is going to have higher standards for the deadlift than someone who is very strong at bench. And you see that from page to page to page. Everyone, again, has their own standards. And on top of that, the standards they push tend to be disconnected from reality because what if you follow someone who's a freak? They're going to have standards that are going to be completely unrealistic. On the flip side, what if you follow someone like me, who is a weakling? Their standards are going to be very, very low. It's a problem in both cases because it doesn't offer something that is objective. And yet, you follow these standards as if they were written in stone. And that's a no-no. Because, again, you follow someone else's opinion, an opinion that sometimes is rooted in hypocrisy. There's a ton of YouTubers who are going to push standards onto you that they themselves cannot meet. Meaning that I've heard a plethora of people on YouTube Fitness who are going to tell you that if you don't bench 3 plates within 2 years, you're a loser. But they themselves didn't bench 3 plates within 2 years. Or they couldn't pull 4 plates within a year. And yet, then afterwards, they propagate these ideas. Why? Well, because as we will see, those standards are rooted in ego. They are not rooted in a rigorous scientific practice. That is for the case when they come from humans. But when it comes to lifting databases that collect everyone's information, you also have to keep in mind they do it indiscriminately, which is just as bad because since there is a majority of noobs, the numbers are artificially lowered. You cannot look at the lowest common denominator and make a strength standard out of that. It's the reason why usually when you attempt to create such standards, you don't go for an average, you go for a median or a more advanced method, something that is going to actually capture the correct result and not let the fact that the bell curve is skewed towards the left side of the spectrum influence the entirety of the results. But every single website I checked to make this video that offers strength standards used an average. They calculated their standards based on an average. It also leads to a second problem. These websites have no way to check if the information being submitted is truthful or not. I can go on a website and say that I bench 1,000 pounds. I am skewing the average. And you can tell me, NH, who would be enough of a fucking loser to lie about their lifts on the internet? Let me see, everyone? Because lots of people lie on the internet, and also a lot of people have a very fragile ego. So even admitting to a machine, an artificial intelligence, that their bench sucks is too much for them. They can't take it. So they lie. I have a YouTube channel, guys. I see you guys in my comments. The amount of people who lie about their physique or strength is too many to count. I don't know why you're trying to impress me, if you're trying to get in my pants, or if it's just something you do to make you feel better about yourself. But I know you don't have 19 inches arms lean. I know you're lying. I know you don't have a 100-pound deadlift. You're a bullshit artist. But when you start plugging that into a website that collects millions of lifts, you understand that the percentage of people who are going to lie about their lifts is plentiful. So the numbers that result and give the standards afterwards are skewed, they're fallacious. And then we also have to keep into account the fact that a lot of people are going to enter numbers for lifts that they don't even do properly. Someone might do a half squat and think that this is a proper squat and enter it in the database. This again gives skewed results. It's paradoxical because between the noobs and the people who lie about their lifts, it balances itself out. So you could say, okay, well, it's shit and it's not scientific at all, but at least it's sort of in the middle. But it doesn't work like that. Sadly, this is just the start. Right now, we're just starting with the nature of the standard as a rough number. I'm proving to you right now that even the collection and creation of the number itself is bogus. So we are in and we are getting at a very rough start. Strength standards are already not looking too good, but we're just getting started. Because now we're going to move into my second point, which is the fact that they don't really serve any purpose. And if I were to ask you right now, hey, what is the goal of having a strength standard in the first place? You couldn't really answer me. What are you going to tell me? Oh, it's that way it tells people if they're strong or not. But how is that useful? How is that something that can be used to actually push people towards better results? It can't. So as to not be in bad faith, and also because if I did that, I would just end the video there, I'm going to try and use the best arguments that someone could come up with to defend strength standards. The first one would be, for example, that strength standards are very important because they let you know where you stand in the pecking order. They give you a rough estimate of what everyone else's strength is, and then it allows you to know where you stand in the hierarchical order of strength. This can be very useful. That way you can know if you can compete. You can know actually also if you are strong or not. Even just for ego's sake, it is something that is going to be very attractive to a lot of people. It's why strength standards are so attractive also, is because it strokes your ego. It strokes it to the point that, again, some people are willing to lie just for a small rush in endorphin, dopamine, whatever. But that is the main thing that people are going to put up. And usually the people who are going to say that are people who are mostly focused on strength, because at the end of the day, these are strength standards. So why am I, a bodybuilder, calling them out? Well, you're going to see that it's for a very simple reason. There are strength standards only in name, because at the end of the day, they barely even correlate with strength. And that's my main problem. We're going to get to that. But if we stick to this pecking order logic, why are people, again, obsessing over a number so as to know where they stand? Well, it's because there is a status in the lifting community that is derived entirely from strength standards, and that is lifting proficiency. If I tell you beginner, novice, intermediate, advanced, elite, what are these things? What are these criteria? What are these qualities? And how do you determine where you stand? There is only one metric, and that is strength. What determines if you're intermediate is strength. I have never on YouTube Fitness heard anyone else use another variable. Some people try exotic stuff, but it always boils down to number. Why? Well, because when you have a category, look at tax brackets, for example, you have to have rough numbers, because if not, it's mayhem, it's chaos. But the issue is that the very existence of these categories hinges on the existence of strength standards. So if we get rid of the categories, we could get rid of strength standards, which leads also to the question, what is the point of these categories? Why is it important for you to know you're intermediate? Again, can you answer that question for me? Because you're most likely someone who's been following strength standards religiously for years and years. And you have also been tracking your lifts to be able to know exactly if you're a novice or advanced for certain lifts. But again, I ask you this question in honest and open faith. Why? What does it do for you? Well, I argue that it does nothing. If those lifting proficiency criteria were based off of work capacity, ability to handle volume, ability to train 4 times a week with intensity, recovery capacities, all of that could correlate directly with an ability to program properly for the self. But because they only correlate with strength, they lose that ability altogether. And this is when you realize that strength standards and those lifting proficiency criteria that derive from them are entirely concerned with strength. Which begs the question, why exactly do bodybuilders espouse them? Because bodybuilders still call themselves intermediate. They still abide by strength standards. Why? Is there a reason for that? Well, the reason is because they have taken over YouTube Fitness. Everyone does it, and therefore it's something that is sort of inevitable. You cannot exist outside of the standard. These are like classes. It's like a social class, and you fall into one whether you like it or not, defined entirely by your lifts. It's something that from the start of the channel I've been against. If you listened to me back then, I already told you, this is not the proper way to approach hypertrophy training. The proper way, in my opinion, is nothing. Because I can shit on strength standards, but I cannot really come up with a replacement. Why? Because the very concept of standards is stupid. The very concept of beginner, novice, and intermediate is stupid. Again, it's impossible to explain why it works. If you have something called an intermediate program, what does it mean? A lot of people ask me, NH, I bench this much, can I do this program? And I'm sitting there like, why would it matter? At the end of the day, some of my programs are accessible to people who have experience with certain lifts and work capacity, but it doesn't really correlate with strength. I'm expecting you to have a certain level of strength, but that's sort of by default. It's not a requirement. We have made it a requirement. So you end up meeting strength standards to be able to fit in a category for no reason. And this is the reason why I also believe that the categories and the standards that allow you to know where you fit in are both, in a sense, coexisting scams. They're like parasitic entities that feed off of one another, but you quickly realize that they're both unneeded. So I know that that's already a big shock. I'm swinging a lot in this video, but it's because the more you think about it, the more you realize that it truly doesn't make any sense. And we've been living that life for so long that many people have sort of lost sight of this. Because again, these statuses are based entirely off of strength levels and exist to let you know where you stand. That's sort of it. It tells you where you stand in strength compared with other people. So beyond stroking your ego, they do nothing. Because if you argue back, well, it's important because that way I have an overview of everyone's strength and I can know if I'm strong or not, which means that I can tell if I'm going to be competitive. I would retort to that if that is truly your goal, what you should be using instead is competition standards. Competition standards for a given strength sport is 1,000 times more accurate than the strength standards that we use on YouTube Fitness for the reason I already explained. If you looked at competition standards, now it's people that compete in the sport you want to partake in that are the top level of the sport and also with every single lift that is not included in an average. It is the pure information that you require to know where you stand if you wish to place in a powerlifting or strongman competition. So why does no one use these things? Well, for a simple reason. You cannot stroke your ego if you compare yourself to the top of the top. Even if you compare yourself to mediocre powerlifters, because at the end of the day, these are very high standards. The strength standards that you follow are for the most part mediocre. But I would argue that if you're the type of person that wants to be able to call themselves strong, you need to compare yourself to the strong. Imagine if someone went to a chess competition and they started to arm wrestle everyone and they won, and then they leave the chess tournament saying, oh, I'm the strongest. Well, no duh, you're comparing yourself to people who don't partake in your sport. You want to test your arm wrestling strength, go to an arm wrestling competition. It's the same logic here. So for those who say that it's a necessary objective information, I've proven that it's not objective, and I've proven that you're not using that for information. The only reason why you want to know where you stand in the social hierarchy is because you've been incepted with the idea that it matters, but you cannot tell me why it matters, and also because it makes you feel better. Not many people share their lifts when they don't fall into a relevant strength standard. People over-obsess with lifts they're very strong at. It's almost a syndrome on YouTube Fitness. It's what I call the deadlift syndrome. You see a plethora of people, usually it's teenagers, who have, like, for example, an amazing deadlift, and that's all they do now. They became a deadlift specialist, but why? Is it because they love the deadlift? No, it's because it's their best lift, so they're going to stick to it because it strokes their ego. The same guy will not share his bench because his bench sucks. This is the truth of strength standards. For the most part, you're going to follow and you're going to showcase the standards that make you look good, and the ones that don't make you look good, you are going to hide. So at the end of the day, there was no true utility to it. Because you have to keep in mind one thing, the modern strength standards, according to the websites I perused, are extremely, extremely low. I actually did an average of them all. I pulled data from every single website I could. The one that I used the most was strength level, if you want to go check it out yourself. And I have come to a grim realization, and that realization is that if you do not look at competition standards, but look at average modern strength standards, they are abysmally low, meaning that if I actually take a look at this website and I follow what they believe to be accurate strength standards for my body weight, I am advanced for the deadlift and the front squat. Now, based on this should mean that I am decently strong at these lifts because I am apparently advanced. Okay, let us look at what I lift. For the deadlift, at 210 pounds, I can pull 485. This, according to the website, means that I'm advanced. For the front squat, I can front squat 330. This also means I'm advanced. Take one look at these lifts, copy paste them and plug them in any relevant competitive standard database. What is it going to tell you? For the first one, deadlift, I wouldn't even place in a powerlifting meet. And it's not that I wouldn't even place. I think they would dock points. If I pulled 5 plates at 200 pounds, they would take points off my total because it is garbage. People at my body weight at the national level pull at least 600, like that's the bare minimum. And then at the world record level, 700 easy, 800 easy. So this is shit. Front squat 330. There are Chinese weightlifters who weigh 140 that can rep this. 330. That is not advanced. That is shit. And this is my issue with strength standards. Because they try to appeal to the lowest denominator, which is you and I, the weaklings, and they try to make us feel better, they present to us numbers that come from an average of people who are like us, average, and therefore that skew the proportion of strength towards the lower end of the bell curve and allow people who are not strong to feel better about themselves. That is truly what strength standards accomplish, but it leads to a problem. You're comparing yourself with weaklings, and therefore what does it mean? Your standards are extremely low. And keep in mind one thing, your standards are going to define your progression because, for the most part, a standard, and it's something that I explained in the introduction, is not going to be something to guide you. It is going to just be a rough direction. But a lot of you guys are going to think that it's the end of the way. You're going to go to the standard and think, I made it, I'm advanced, I'm strong. But you're not strong because you've made the capital mistake of looking at people like me and thinking that I represent any sort of relevant authority on strength. I see that on the channel all the time. People who say, oh, you snatch with deadlift 4 plates, it's so strong. No, it's not. An actual powerlifter at my body weight would rep 7 plates, easy. Do not use weaklings like me as examples. The only thing you're doing by doing this is you are lowering your standards, and that is the last thing that I want. But I've just proven to you that with the modern methods of creating strength standards, the only thing they do is this. They lower themselves because they don't give you an accurate representation of what strength potential should be. So that's for strength. That is just for strength. Strength standards hurt strength. Now we're going to look at hypertrophy because, in truth, most people use strength standards not to decide where they stand to compete, not to be able to tell if they're strong or not, but as a benchmark for hypertrophy. And this is when fitness YouTubers come into play, because for the vast majority of the time, when a YouTuber is going to share their strength standards with you, they're not talking about strength. They should call it a size standard. Strength is just an excuse. And I'm sure you know exactly what I mean. Listen up and tell me if this sounds familiar. If you lift X amount of weights on X lift, you will look like this. If you lift this much on squat, your legs will look like this. If you can overhead press this much, your shoulders will look like this. It's tens of dozens of guys who say things like this. It is almost a tradition on YouTube Fitness. But what does it mean? What does it prove? It proves that strength standards have long lost their ability to judge or to measure strength and are now used almost entirely for hypertrophy, meaning that we are supposed to derive from a certain amount of plates on the bar an ability to build the body. And this is idiotic. And it should sound idiotic. When I tell you, oh, if you can curl this much, you'll have this big of a bicep, there should be an alarm going off in your head screaming, idiot, 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 because it is childish as an argument and a thesis to promote. And yet, I know many people who still do and who don't seem to understand that it's a problem. Why? Not because they're cretins, but because for the most part, they've been evolving in this YouTube fitness scene for so long that they stopped questioning the very concept and principles that they use. The issue with that type of mindset of trying to correlate a strength standard to a muscle size is that this ignores variables such as individual leverage, past lifting experience, differences in nervous systems, training styles, time spent lifting, etc., etc. If you look at someone and you tell them, oh, if you can bench this much, you'll have a big chest. Well, you're not looking at how long their arms are. Someone with very long arms will not be able to bench as much, but because the range of motion is higher, there's going to be more muscle damage, so they'll lift less, but they might get a bigger chest than someone who is going to have short arms if they get to the same level of strength. That is just logical. What about past lifting experience? What about muscle memory? This is something I'm going to explain later, but you also understand that this throws a wrench in the entire thesis and attempt, again, at correlating size and strength. What about the differences in nervous systems? I know guys who are gifted for strength, not because they have good leverages, but they were just born with a nervous system that just fires out power output like it's nothing. And therefore, these are guys that are going to get very strong very fast, but it's not going to really correlate to any size gains. Same for training styles. Saying this ignores training styles, because if you tell someone, oh, if you can press 2 plates on the overhead press, you'll have big shoulders. Okay, but how are they getting there? See, it's the issue with strength standards. Strength standards point a direction and they point you towards that direction and they just say, okay, once you get there, you'll see. But how do I get there? And also, there are a million ways to get there. What if I take the long way around? Someone who progresses to a 2-plate overhead press in 3 years is not going to have the same set of shoulders as someone who does it in 1 year. Why? Difference in tonnage, in volume, in intensity, in frequency, in recovery, all of these play a massive role. And this is always completely ignored by people who push strength standards. But why? Again, it's not just explainable by the fact that they don't think, because it would be too easy. I'm not the only person with a brain on this platform. I think that the reason why, for the most part, YouTubers use strength standards to that extent and for the goal of hypertrophy is because it's a one-size-fits-all system and it's extremely convenient because it's always easier to look at the majority and create rules for the majority rather than to look at the individual. And times again, fitness YouTubers have proven that they fall for that trap because they just don't possess the ability again to think for you. But they don't also want to tell you outright, hey, figure it out yourself, asshole. So they have to come up with global solutions. But the issue is that global solutions, for the most part, don't work because by trying to apply something like a standard to everyone, it ends up applying to no one. If I were to give you a metaphor, it would be extremely simple. If there is a crowd of 100 people and you try to fit all of their feet in a size 11.5 shoe, the vast majority of people will have difficulties actually fitting their feet into the shoe. Most people will have pain. Most people will not be able to actually use the shoe. Why? Because you try to apply a specific standard to a non-specific group of people. You are trying to use a general guideline to a specific crowd, and that's simply not doable. Standards aim to offer a universal answer to a galaxy of individuals, and that is their death. Philosophically, it is their death, meaning that they were doomed at the start. In the womb, the concept of strength standards was already dead. It was, as we say in English, a stillbirth. Before it was even created and introduced into this world, it was already dead. It couldn't have worked because of the very concept that it presents. And this is why, for the most part, people who use strength standards end up just relying on absolute numbers. And by absolute numbers, I mean that they just take the highest possible number and they use that as a standard. Why? It's a strategy. They know for a fact that you're not going to be able to hit that standard. Most people are not going to be able to hit that standard. So if they make a promise associated with the standard, if you cannot meet the standard, you don't actually get the benefits, but it's not their fault. It's your fault for not meeting their stupid standard. A standard which, again, they just came up with. How many people their standard is 225, 4 or 5? Why is it always round numbers? And why is it always round numbers that correlate exactly with the amount of 45s on the plate? You've ever asked yourself that? I've never heard anyone say, oh, my squat standard is 368. No, it's always 405, 315. You never stop for a second and thought, I think this person is taking me for an idiot because they're just using, again, numbers that are convenient because they sound good. And this is all of the mythos and the legend surrounding things like 1 plate overhead press, 2 plate bench. What is that? It doesn't exist in nature. We came up with that. These are cultural standards associated with lifting. Strength standards that we created. There is nothing special with a 2 plate bench. There is nothing special with a 3 plate squat. If we didn't use 45-pound plates, if for some reason the barbells weren't weighing the weight that they weigh right now, we would have different standards and they would be just as idiotic because we are trying to create something objective off of subjective criteria. So it simply doesn't work. I absolutely want you to keep these things in mind because they sort of reveal the entire masquerade of strength standards. And again, to loop back to what I said, all of this is sort of understood by YouTubers who then always are going to tell you things like, oh yeah, if you can press 3 plates on the bench, you're going to have a big chest. This again is a childish argument. Of course you're going to have a big chest if you press 3 plates. It's a pretty decent bench. So by default, the vast majority of people who are going to be able to hit it will have developed their chest in the meanwhile. It is the equivalent of saying to someone, oh, you want to get good at math? Get a PhD in like nuclear physics. I mean, you're going to have to get a good level at math to get there, but why would you have to aim that high? That's also the issue with strength standards. Because they really have nothing to do with strength and they only really correlate with hypertrophy, because at the end of the day, as I just explained, we should have called them size standards a long time ago. Strength is just an excuse used to be able to create the connection. It also leads to lifts that are going to be extremely high being pushed as standards, when in reality you could get similar results with less weight. If you hear someone tell you, oh, you want big traps, get a 7 plate deadlift. How about getting a 5 plate deadlift and then doing shrugs? You would get similar results. It's the same for every single lift. It's almost insulting that people would push these standards on you thinking that you're not going to have the ability to understand that there is a problem with the entire method. But it's utilized again because it's a system that is extremely convenient for YouTubers. To show you how stupid the system truly is, I simply have to proceed to a simple inversion. If I were to tell you, hey, if you get 20 inches arms, you'll have a strong curl. Yes, because if I manage to get such a high measurement for the arms, surely I'll have strong biceps. It's completely illogical. And many people who push strength standards, if I told them that, they would look at me and say, yes, you are correct. It would be stupid to say that. But the issue is that your strength standards that you push are the exact same. They try to be precise, but they fail because of the sample group size that they come from. Then they become vague with what I just described with the 3-plate bench for a big chest, because if they can become vague, they always apply. And since they always apply because they use absolute numbers that are always going to correlate to results, they are rendered entirely useless. Because people insisted on creating standards that made sense, they turned them into things that are entirely nonsensical. So the very nature of a strength standard, or a standard altogether, means that by default it cannot make any sense, because if it made sense, it would not be a standard. So I hope that this is clear. Because, and this is sort of the gist of it, and the reason why you will never hear me or anyone with a brain push size standards, they mostly constitute reverse engineering. And therefore, they can't accomplish what they set out to do, because it simply doesn't work like that. It's the PhD example already used. Strength standards are a bit more vicious in that aspect, because I see many people use it, again, in a way to stroke their ego. I have seen people who have channels that correlate more with strength utilize the fact that they're stronger than others so as to shut their mouth. I have seen people say, oh, if you cannot squat 4 plates, then shut up. This is vicious, and this truly also shows that there is no true benevolence attached to strength standards. The goal was never truly to help people. At the end of the day, you cannot select an arbitrary number for a given value, so strength, then deduct the existence of a secondary variable from it, size. This is basic math, and this comes from someone who, again, is terrible at the science of mathematics, and yet I understand that. So I don't get why other people do not have the ability to do that. I hope it's clear. It's clear in my head. The things I say right now are just evident, but I know that many people might retort back, well, yeah, but if I do get a 3-plate bench, I will have a big chest. And to that I say again, why do you obsess over the 3-plate bench when what you really want is a big chest, knowing full well that that very standard might be the reason why you do not get your big chest. And the reason, again, is not rooted in the fact that many people are idiots, it's mostly rooted in psychology. Strength standards are a very useful tool, or at least they are a very relevant tool when it comes to actually manipulating people. People manipulate themselves with standards for a simple reason. They correlate directly with what I call the rationalization of fitness. People who engage in fitness, bodybuilding or powerlifting want clear answers. They don't want to tell you to just train. They don't want to tell you that, they don't want to be told that if they just put in the work, they're going to get results. They want a clear answer. And if you add to that the impatience of new lifters, this leads directly to the modern strength standards, which, for the most part, are ballpark answers that create a general sense of confusion for everyone involved. And that's my main reproach for strength standards. When someone says, oh, if you get a 5-plate deadlift, you'll have a big back or whatever. It's innocent. It looks like it's innocuous. It's not going to hurt people. But you have to look at what it does to individuals. Your standard that you try to generalize so that it applies to everyone. What does it do to that one guy? Well, let me tell you right now, because I know exactly what it does. For people who are gifted for strength, strength standards, for the most part, will lead to a certain form of despair. Because since they're gifted, they're going to get to the standard, but they're not going to be as big as they think they should be. Because their favorite YouTuber told them, hey, if you can get to this, you'll look like this. And they look nothing like that. They don't even look close to that. But what they fail to realize is that it has nothing to do with them having bad genetics for hypertrophy. It's just that they have a ton of potential for strength. So, because they have better leverage or better nervous system, their body, as a machine, doesn't require that much muscle mass to move the weight. So, for someone, for example, they could get to a 2-plate overhead press and still have small shoulders. I've said that in the past, and I've had people tell me, NH, it's impossible. When you push 2 plates overhead, you have big shoulders. It's inevitable. I can go on YouTube right now and find you 50 videos of guys who are skinny, who have small shoulders, who press 2 plates. Why? Because you have started to fall for the strength standards meme, and so you believe that they're absolute and they directly correlate. It is not true. Yes, the vast majority of the population, if they can press 2 plates, will have big shoulders. But it goes back to the simplistic argument that is completely debunked when you realize that many will not press 2 plates, many don't need to press 2 plates to have big shoulders, and that there are people that will press it but will not see the results. And therefore, they will become discouraged. If you want a good laugh, go look at my video where I overhead press. People are like confused because they see someone who's bigger than them by a mile, who has a much weaker overhead press, and it just doesn't compute in their brain because strength standards have replaced the ability to think. Instead of thinking, maybe I'm gifted for the press, and this means that to get as big of a shoulder girdle as this guy, I'm going to have to get much stronger than him because his standard is here and my standard is here. No, what do they think? Well, if my standard is here and my strength is here, my size should also be here. So it makes no sense that I don't have it. It is something that leads many to just give up on aesthetics because they think they'll never get it. But at the end of the day, it's because something called a strength standard has made them lose sight of the fact that they might have strength potential. That is how vicious they truly are. And then for weaker people who might not be gifted, well, it's also a form of despair. These same people will also believe and listen to the YouTuber that told them, hey, get this number and you'll get that result. They'll struggle to reach that number. And when they fail, because the number is just not in their reach, or at least not in the timeline that the YouTuber gave them to follow, they are going to also think that they are fucked. They're never going to actually reach their goal. And that is also the reason why people who have started to believe that strength is the key to hypertrophy tend to have shit bodies. It's because you abide by standards that are arbitrary, out of reach, vague, that just don't really correlate to anything in reality. You follow them, you get no results, and you think, oh, it must be me. I must be the problem. And I'm here to tell you that you are not the problem. You are simply trying to fit your foot in a shoe that is not the right size. You have taken advice on clothing on someone who doesn't know what you like. You have went to a restaurant and eaten a dish even though you are allergic to nuts and the plate and the dish that you're eating is full of cashews. You have again been betrayed to some level and you fail to realize that. I'm trying to help you realize it. And that's especially true with novices because strength standards make a lot of victims, but the number one type of person that is going to be hurt by them is the people who just get started, because what strength standards do to them is that it convinces them that these are the El Dorado, and therefore they desperately rush towards them, they chase numbers, and that's because that's what they've been told, and because that's what they've been told, they also think that once they get that number, they're going to feel better, their life is going to be better. I experienced that. I was told that once I was going to press 3 plates, all of the answers of life were going to be revealed to me. And guess what happened? I got to a 3-plate bench and I felt absolutely nothing because it was sold to me. It's what I call PR culture. Everyone is obsessed with the PR, but no one thinks about what the PR does to you and what you have to put in to get it. For example, let's look at the bench again. Why do you think so many people end up bulking to get a bigger bench? It's because it works. The more body fat you have, the more mass you have, the more you can press. But if you started and your goal was a bigger chest, and now you're bulking like a fat pig to be able to have a bigger bench, you realize that there is a problem. Your original goal was replaced without you even realizing. You step into the gym saying, I want a bigger chest. Strength standards come into play saying, hey, you want a bigger chest? Get that number. And now that's what you chase. But you've long lost sight of size. And once you get that number, if you have a little bit of intelligence, you will realize that for the most part, because you over-focused on the standard and meeting it, the results you expected to get from the standard vanish in thin air. And this leads people to rush strength progression when what they really wanted at the start was looks. Too many examples to even cite. I was like this. I'm someone who got to a 3-plate bench and more, then realized that it didn't really correlate with what I wanted. But I think that the most egregious example, and the one I see the most, is the 4-plate deadlift obsession. I do not know what it is about, but for some reason, teenagers want nothing more than to pull 4 plates. And they want it so much that they're willing to push everything aside. They're willing to do any type of program, they're willing to do any sacrifice to get that 4 plate, even if it means bulking at an uncomfortable body fat. But for what? You're going to get that 4 plates, then what? What happens? Well, I'll tell you what happens. Nothing. Because it's one, an arbitrary strength standards that was just created based on nothing, and two, even if it did mean nothing, once you reach the number, it's not like there's a magical fairy that's going to come out of the locker room to offer you the secret of eternal gains. If anything, you're going to be like one of the many idiots that is going to hurt their back because they're going to just lift with shitty form because they want to lift 4 plates as fast as possible, and they're going to end up just sabotaging their lifting career. It's stupid. But you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of young men who want to ditch their virginity so much that they're willing to have sex with whatever. Like, they will give their first time to an STD-ridden skank just to be able to tell their friends, oh, I'm not a virgin anymore. Cool. What changed? What happened when you lost your virginity? Nothing. It's not a biological thing. It's just in your head. It's the same with all of those milestones that you see people push. Once you achieve them, nothing happens. But the issue is that not only are you achieving a worthless goal, it replaces your original goal. And that is a problem, because this is the reason why we see nowadays that YouTube fitness culture prioritizes strength over size. How many times have you heard someone say, oh, size equals strength. You want to get strong, you want to get bigger, just get stronger. This again should feel insulting. You should feel insulted in your intelligence when people propose such simplistic ideas. It's not as simple as strength, arrow pointing to the right, size. If that were the case, everyone would be immensely jacked and immensely strong. But that's not something you see. And it's something that should be evident when you look at the physiques of natural powerlifters. If getting really strong was the key to getting really big, those guys would look the best. And vice versa, because I can flip your entire idea on its head. I already did it with size standards and the 20-inch arm. If apparently those two variables fit each other and carry over to that extent, doesn't that mean that pro bodybuilders should be the strongest? Because they're the biggest, but you know that this is bullshit. You can point out and say, oh, that doesn't make sense. But why? Why are you able to see it when it's in that direction and not this one? Well, it's simple. Look at the strength and size with the arrow. You've convinced yourself that size was just a byproduct of strength, so you see the arrow pointing this way and you think it's normal. When I flip the arrow and I tell you that strength is a byproduct of size, now you flip your shit. The issue is that, in truth, the arrow is pointing both ways. It is something that anyone who trains for long enough will eventually come to understand, unless they are blinded by something like strength standards. And to give you an example to prove what I just said, let's take two people, right? Clones of one another. And these two people want bigger legs. They have the same genetics, they've been training the same amount of time, right? It's the same guy. We're going to put one on a program that is going to rush them to a 3-plate squat, because if you can squat 3 plates, you're going to have big legs. And the other one is going to take the long way, meaning that they're still going to progress on strength, but they're not going to over-prioritize on a 3-plate squat. Once number one reaches that 3-plate squat and we observe the size of their leg, what are we going to find? We are going to find that, for the most part, they either will have similarly sized legs, meaning that the guy with a bigger squat will not have an advantage on the other one, or worse, we will see that the guy who squats less will have bigger quads. And now you can tell me, well, that's bullshit. It's not possible. You cannot be weaker and have bigger legs. Wrong. You absolutely can. It's based on the type of training that you pursue. If guy number one, clone number one, is going to do something like squat every day once they've built a base, this is a good way to put a lot of strength on your squat, but you're not going to gain much size. Why? It lacks volume. If the other guy squats 2 or 3 times a week with other types of knee flexions and accumulates the volume, he might progress in strength on a wide area of different lifts or in the same line of specificity, feed more damage and fatigue to the legs, not have that free plate squat, but at the end of the day, still have bigger legs. This is the example that should show you that this mad pursuit of strength standards is a mistake. Too many people, even people that I respect, have a tendency to think that strength standards are bad because they apply differently to 2 different people. That's already stepping in the right direction, meaning that they'll tell you, hey, guy A could have 20 inches legs but have a bigger squat than guy B who has 26 inches legs. So in that case, it would be stupid to correlate size with strength and create size standards. The issue is that if you apply the same logic but you flip it on its head, it's also something that can be said for the strength standards. Just because guy A has a 500-pound squat doesn't mean that he cannot have, doesn't mean that he's going to have bigger legs than guy B who has a 300-pound squat. And then you take that to the next level and you take only one guy with the example I just used and you clone him and you see that even that same guy, whether he actually applies strength standards or not, can get completely different results. So it is the reason why the role that strength standards serve was supposedly strength at the start, but as I've proven, it's mostly size, and that it fails entirely in these 2 pursuits, leading to people to just have subpar results because you follow against standards that are going to lead you astray. It is possible to trade size for strength and vice versa because these are not codependent metrics. They are only correlated within the individual itself. It's what I already explained just this instant with my example. This means that everyone has their own size to strength balance, which you could call genetics, that englobate a ton of things like nervous system, leverages, etc., that also relies on their environment, meaning the training. It's the reason why the clone example I used is so important to understand. Even though they had the same genetics, because they had different environments and different training stimulus, they got different results. And because I know that some of you guys only respond to arguments of authority, let me pull out of my bag the ultimate name and the ultimate name drop in reality, Candido Training. Candido Training is a well-respected strength athlete, and he himself has stated that he has managed to lose size and gain pounds on his total. Inversely, it is possible to lose strength and gain size. This is just purely logical. The only way you can tell me that that's not true is if you again believe that size is just inferior and that strength dictates everything, which I'm going to prove is bullshit. In a video I'm going to put out on Saturday where I'm going to talk about the difference between training for hypertrophy and training for strength. So stay tuned for that. But if you want an example coming from myself that also illustrates the reason why strength standards are useless, back in the days, I got injured on the squat, meaning that my strength regressed, and I had to progress back up because I was hurt. So after my rehab, I progressed back up. And guess what happened? I got injured at, I think, 3 plates. I regressed back to 2 plates. And when I was back at 3 plates again, I had bigger legs. How do you explain that? My strength was at the same level, and yet my size was higher. Why? Because strength and size don't work like this. They don't carry over one-to-one. It's not your size does this and your strength does this. It is true that size progression will have an impact on strength progression and vice versa. So the 2 metrics need to be taken into account, but they are not exclusive and they are not codependent. It is something incredibly important. They are simply correlated. So it's something to keep in mind. You cannot surmise potential size from a strength standard. So every time you hear someone that says, oh, if you can lift this much, you look like this, disregard, it's nonsense. And if it is making sense, it's because they used a number that is so high that it must apply. I'm not going to re-explain it, but yeah, if you squat 6 plates, chances are you're going to have big legs, even though that's not always the case. My counter-argument is that you could squat 3 plates and have big legs as well. So why would you shoot for something that is such a high standard when what you truly want is size, and you could get it without actually jumping through so many hoops? Because keep in mind also that if you specialize in strength, there's a chance you're going to sabotage your size pursuit. It's the PhD argument all over again. And now we're going to get into my last point, which is the fact that these standards create deadlines that do a lot of damage to people's psyche, because people end up treating strength like an end to a mean when it was supposed to stay just a mean. It's the paradox of strength standards. As I said, they hurt strength, they make a mockery out of strength because they were never about strength in the first place, but they still put strength at the center of everything, and therefore people end up just obsessing over the standard, and they stop being able to use strength for its intended purpose, which is gaining size. And that is simply rooted in psychology, by the way. Strength progression is much more attractive to the human brain than measurements. And that's clear-cut and very simply to observe. If you look at the ability to measure progress based on weight on the bar, it is immensely more satisfying than measurements. Why? Because it's tangible. A 5-pound jump on your bench is something that you can see. It's something that you can feel. Whereas the amount of size you'll gain on your chest, if you gain 5 pounds on the bench, is almost nothing. It's impossible to notice. It's imperceivable. It's happening, but it's not staring you in the face. Whereas strength progression is right there. And that's the reason why, by the way, many people start lifting for size, apply strength standards to get to that goal, then they get sucked into strength because it is just much more satisfying. It is the law of instant gratification. It's the reason why programs like 5x5, all of these starting strength templates are extremely popular. It's the reason why bulking when you're a novice is popular. Why? You can put so much weight on the bar. It's so gratifying because you see progression. Human beings are conditioned to look for progress. We do not put effort towards things that do not directly correlate with gain. It's a survival instinct in a sense, because it would be a waste of resources. It's the reason why so many people quit lifting once they plateau or once they don't progress as fast. Why? The amount of effort they have to put in doesn't correlate with what they think they should be getting back. But understand that this starts the first day you start lifting. Newbie gains are poison for the brain because they just are going to hook you up with such a large amount of gratification with all of those pounds and plates on the bar that when it eventually stops, you are going to crash and burn. You are going to feel pain. And that is a problem because all of that is ushered in by strength standards. And I don't blame you for that, by the way. I perfectly understand that plate math is much more savors in a sense than just looking for a small improvement on your bicep that you're going to notice in 6 months. So that explains the entire powerlifting-centric YouTube fitness. But keep in mind that it's also the reason why many people end up with terrible physiques, is because they over-scope on strength. And there's this, and then there's something else. And that something else is the... How can I put that in words so as to make it as offensive as possible? It's the childishness of people in general, because what I already described is already childish in a sense that focus on just numbers, but it goes beyond that. A mathematical objective is always going to trump an abstract goal. It's the reason why, even though I push a goal physique, I understand that a goal physique is very abstract, and many people will rather just look at strength standards because they're more satisfying. So in a sense, it's an appeal to reason. It's an appeal to the person in you that will only respond if there is a direct change. If there is no perceivable change, you are not going to stick to it. But as I said, it's fairly childish because some things take time. Some things are not going to be as evident in their evolution. And this childishness, by the way, is abused by YouTubers because strength standards give the power to YouTubers to offer you very clear-cut answers. It's something I already covered, but I want to sort of go into details here because it's something I see all the time on this channel or in other channels. And it's mainly the reason why YouTubers recycle these strength standards and apply it even if they've never thought about it. It's because we end up having to answer some of your questions and we just don't know how. It's like when we're with a kid and the kid is asking like, what was before the Big Bang? Or what was before the Earth? Why is the sky blue? And you try to answer, but the kid is never satisfied. And at the end of the day, you have to give an absolute answer because that's the only thing that is going to shut the kid's mouth. This is strength standards. Strength standards were born from a need of YouTubers to give answers to questions that have no answers. For example, when will I have a big chest? Typical question you're going to get as a fitness YouTuber. Well, what do you answer to that? The real answer is when you will. When will I have a bigger ass? I don't know, when you will. When will my neck grow? When it grows. See, it's same tautology, but it's the only answer we can provide because it's the only truth. But YouTubers can tell you that because it would make you upset. You would continue asking like a kid would, and therefore we have to come up with something absolute. So when you ask, when will I have a big chest? A YouTuber will say, when you can bench X. Is it true? No, absolutely not. It cannot apply. Again, they are giving you a shoe with a random size. The chances of the size applying to you is infinitesimally slow. I think it's a word. And therefore, it is simply not accurate, but it's just a knee-jerk answer. The issue is that that knee-jerk answer, that strength standard, because that's how they were created again, when YouTuber push them, opens Pandora's box. Because the next question is going to be, okay, cool. Well, if I will have a big chest when I can bench 225, when will I bench 225? See, this is the problem. It doesn't really give an answer. Strength standards try to create something that is going to serve as a response, but it doesn't lead to anything because it's not logical. So it's the snake that bites its own tail. It's simply not sound. The more I talk about it, the more I'm thinking, man, how did we use them for so long? And why hasn't anyone actually realized that the entire system is a Ponzi scheme? It doesn't function. It's the equivalent, again, of being a parent and being stuck in a car with the kid, and the kid keeps asking when we're going to get home. And the answer is, when we get home. We cannot give you another answer than that, but if we give you that answer, you're going to throw a tantrum. And that is the absolute truth. So this one is from the heart. This goes out to all of the people who ask me, oh, if I live for 3 years, will I be big? And if I do this, will I have a bigger chest or bigger arms? The answer is, I don't fucking know, and no one knows. Stop asking. Put in the work. You know these questions are stupid. You know I can't answer you. I don't know you. Based on all of the potential criteria I would have to apply to give you a solid answer, you should be able to also take from that the only person that can answer it is you. And not even you of right now. You of the future. Only you of the future knows when you will get big arms. You don't have the ability to tell. And strength standards especially don't have that ability. So stop trying to get that type of absolute answers, because then you turn YouTubers into scorned parents that are going to give you shit answers like, why did grandma die? Or because it was her time, or where is the dog? He's at the farm. No, the dog is dead. I don't know if getting that amount on the bench is going to grow your chest. I don't know how many pounds you're going to have to put on the bar to actually get big legs. All of these questions are just expectatives. They are up in the air. Only you can answer it, but because we're fitness YouTubers and we're supposed to know everything, we created bogus standards just so you would leave us alone. And this has bred a terrible attitude, by the way, because just like the kid in the car that wants to get home, you are a old brat. You cannot wait to get to a 25 bench. You cannot wait to get a bigger chest. But at the end of the day, this also means that for the most part, you're never going to get it, because you're typically the type of person that is going to, I don't know, be in class and study, and every 2 minutes you look at the clock. Why? You're not really interested in studying. You just want it to be over. It's the same with lifting. You are so intent on rushing and get to the end goal that you're never going to get there. Because every 15 seconds, you take a break to measure how far you are from the goal. And that is the reason why you are never going to get the physique that you want, and you're never going to get the strength levels that you want. And all of that was brought to you by strength standards. Strength standards were created by your shitty attitudes and are being reinforced by your shitty attitude. It is a vicious circle. It's the reason why, even though I technically used in the past some standards, I use them again in the absolute term, which is still shit and garbage, but we still do it because if I tell you that, oh, just squat 5 plates and you'll have big legs, technically I'm not lying to you, but I'm lying to you because it's not appropriate. You could get big legs without having to get there. I already explained that. So that was a rant, but it was needed. You needed to hear that. Also, and this also plays into the entire psychology aspect, it's important to point out that no one wants to be a beginner. It's the reason why I don't like these categories as well, is because there is a judgment of value attached to them. If someone is a noob, that's bad. It's not a thing that people want to be called. Noob is almost an insult. It means that you suck. Whereas advanced and elite sound much better. So guess what it creates? It creates an incentive in people to stop being a beginner as soon as possible. It's the exact same thing with the virgin. It's a stigma that you carry on you. But what does it do? Well, it makes people rush down newbie phase because they're desperate to be cool. They're desperate to be able to say that they have finally met a strength standard that is relevant. That means that they're something better than just a jellyfish. And the issue is that when you look at the standards and the way they evolve, it gets worse and worse because they sound better and better. And then you have the last one, which is elite. And I'm sorry, can we take 1 second and observe the elite? Like, guys, what's the next step? Are you going to start to suck your own dick? Are you going to fillet yourself? Elite? You want me to go grab palms and just make some wind towards your face like this? Do you want me to actually grab some fruits and feed you directly? How did it get to the point where we created categories that are so linked with our egos that are directly designed to make us feel better? Elite, just listen to it. Elite, what is the elite? It's the best of the best. So technically it works, it correlates. For example, for powerlifting, if you tell me, I'm elite for powerlifting. Yeah, you are, because you would place very high. But for the rest, when strength standards are used in the real world, these categories mean absolutely nothing. They are just entirely toxic. Because they don't take into account the amount of time you've been lifting. You're elite, you've been lifting 20 years. That makes sense to me. But at the end of the day also, just because you are elite doesn't mean you're going to get the body that you want, because these don't correlate to anything beyond strength. So I think it is time that we either do away with them or we revamp their definitions. I've already attempted that. I've told you that in my opinion, you are an intermediate the day you actually start programming for yourself. I don't really know what I could actually come up with for advanced. In reality, I piss on these categories because they're completely fucking useless. So I use novices and intermediates, but I'm held hostage. It's the reason why I also want to prove to you that these standards are useless. I'm forced to use denominations and semantics that I disagree with because it's the only way I can communicate. Because if I don't, you would think I speak Klingon. There are entire realms of fitness that are entirely linked with strength standards to the point that if you refuse to use strength standards to actually explain things to people, they don't understand it anymore. It's going to take some time, but I believe we can do away with that because people rush down newbie phases because of these standards, and therefore everything that is supposed to happen during the newbie phase falls apart. They fail to build a base because they rush to strength as soon as possible, so they lift with shit form, they don't pay attention to their technique, they gain way too much weight, they don't actually look at the way the program is built. All of that correlates to then individuals who are going to become intermediates, ooh, big deal, intermediates, and they are going to suck, and they're going to quit, because keep in mind one thing, there is such a thing as intermediate curse. The vast majority of people, beyond the ones that quit after 2 weeks, quit when they become intermediate. Why do you think that is? It's for a simple reason. It's because the jump from novice to intermediate is entirely sabotaged. Once you get to that second stage, you think something magical is going to happen and nothing happens. And for the most part, because you are so intently focused on getting to the intermediate stage, you never thought about what it was supposed to bring to you. And therefore, it brings nothing. Because when you chase nothing, you get nothing. That should be logical. I'm not going to spend too much time on that because I can sense myself just spinning out of control, but that is my honest belief when it comes to that. And what I just said also correlates to the fact that many YouTubers associate their standards with a deadline. And this is when standards, strength standards, go from useless to bad to atrocious, because the second you introduce a time component to a strength standard, it becomes a ticking time bomb. It becomes toxic because it adds to the shame factor and it leads people to ego lift and be discouraged. When you tell someone, yeah, you have to hit that strength standard in 2 years or else you suck, what happens? They're going to be desperate to hit it because now not only have they been told that what they want is going to occur only when they get the standard, they've also been told that if they wait too long to get to the standard, it's going to vanish in thin air. It's the same with newbie gains. How many times have you heard, oh, don't waste your newbie gains, as if there was a chrono that started the day you pick up a weight, and then when the chrono stops, the newbie gains are over. It doesn't work like that. Biology doesn't work like that. It's the reason why I say that the newbie gain and the newbie phase is also toxic. It's something presented as supposed to help you, supposed to be beneficial, but at the end of the day, it just damages your psyche. It gives you a bad attitude towards training, and it's the reason why so many people quit and so many people are hopeless. Because it creates damage. It also creates psychological plateaus. And it's something that is very easy to see, again, when you look at the plate math. How many people plateau at a 3-plate bench? How is that possible? How come so many people, if I were to look at a group and I made an average, how many of them would actually have their first plateau at 225, 275, 315? Why? Always round fucking numbers that correlate with 245s and a 25 or 335s. How is that possible? Well, it's because it's a plateau that's created up there. Created by what? Strength standard. You reach the standard, so now you're satisfied and you cannot go further. It happened to me. I got to 3 plates and then I couldn't progress anymore. And I thought, oh, maybe it's my training. It wasn't my training. Because one day, someone loaded 325 on the bar and I pressed it like it was nothing. It was all up in my head. But that is something that I want to sort of end on. Strength standards that are supposed to be beacons, that you're supposed to shoot for, that are seen as directions, are seen as numbers to hit, in reality only artificially limit you, because, always keep that in mind, a standard is defined by its ceiling. The only thing that strength standards have always done is make people believe that training for size is just chasing strength, and 2, make people have shit strength because they have preconceived notions of what is going to constitute their limits. See, that's the problem as well. As I told you, some strength standards are vague because they're too absolute. Some strength standards are going to be too low, but at the end of the day, the problem remains the same. These are numbers that don't correlate to you. I've heard something that stuck with me for a long time. There used to be a powerlifter who was breaking records. And when he was interviewed and they were asking him, hey, when did you realize you were strong? He said, oh, I realized at my first competition, because he had never compared his strength with anyone else and he had never checked any standards. So he had no one else to compare himself with. He had no limitations. This glass ceiling that is imposed by strength standards was never present. And if you say, oh, that's hocus pocus bullshit and the power of the mind, yeah, but your mind moves your body. And I can tell you for a fact that most of you guys who think that they're limited by their genetics, you're not limited by your genetics, you're limited by this. You have self-limiting beliefs, and that is the truth. And strength standards are exactly that. They do not constitute a real goal, they do not constitute something to shoot for, they constitute a wall. Your first plateau is going to be caused by that standard, and that is the absolute truth. And that concludes that video. So I hope I was clear. I hope that the thesis was well presented. If you want to be able to actually observe my work and actually read it, it's not that long. I'm going to put it in the pinned comment again so you can observe it. If you want to make a reaction video, it's up to you. If you want to share in the comments what you think, it is also up to you. And I'm going to leave you with my conclusion. Strength standards are entirely useless at helping you achieve your hypertrophic goals. Worse, they even fail at promoting strength, as they often lower the standard rather than raising it up. The rabid desire for clear-cut numbers led to their popularity, and they are being kept alive by general dogmatism and ego-driven behaviors. While aiming for a number can constitute a valid goal, it is always best to pick it yourself and not let your limitations be decided by others. At the end of the day, there is only one type of standard that is going to be relevant, and that's the one you will create for yourself. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.